watching Game of Thrones, will you pay the gold price or the iron price?
And will we ever be really comfortable talking to tech?
Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Adam Turner, and I'm here with the true heir to the Iron Throne, Alex Kidman.
Where are my dragons?
Alex, what's new in tech?
Microsoft's made a number of announcements at its Build conference, including the reintroduction of the Start menu, sort of, to Windows 8.1, Windows itself being free for OEMs producing tablets and smartphones, and the introduction of Cortana, a Siri-style personal assistant that you talk to. Although I do wonder if anyone who's played through Halo 4 thought at any point, you know, I reckon she's going to end up in a smartphone.
While Microsoft is announcing a raft of new features for Windows 8 and Office for iPad, it's also putting the old Windows XP out to pasture. Almost 13 years after it launched, Microsoft is finally ending security updates for Windows XP, which means you will be vulnerable to new threats. If you're running XP, it's time to move on and upgrade to at least Windows 7, if not Windows 8.
Sony's announced that new buyers of its Xperia Z2 smartphone will be able to score a copy of Michael Jackson's new album Escape when it comes out. Not that this is technically a new album of music, because, well, Jackson's still dead, but what's interesting here is that it pinpoints a kind of time frame when we can expect to see the Z2 officially launched. Sony's announced it, but not when we can get it, but the timing of the album suggests that we should see it by the end of May at the latest.
Just in time for the return of Game of Thrones, Foxtel streaming video service Foxtel Play is coming to the PlayStation 3. Sorry PS4 fans, Foxtel says you're still on the roadmap. Even so, coming to the PlayStation 3 makes Foxtel Play one of Australia's most accessible streaming video services alongside QuickFlix. So Alex, we're being increasingly encouraged to talk to our tech, and sometimes it even talks back. Is this a sign of silicon senility, or is it the way of the future?
Well, science fiction would suggest it's the way of the future. It's all very Star Trek. They all talk to their computers there, and that's, seen as very normal and socially acceptable, and it all works. Right now, I'm not quite so sold. Yeah.
You don't see Picard going, I said phasers, damn it, fire the phasers! Phasers!
Exactly.
Bang,
I mean, poor
you're
Scotty
dead.
would just suffer
Yes.
endlessly. But I mean, even leaving the accuracy thing apart, because I actually think accuracy's gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
As this technology's improved, and I mean, you'd expect that. There's a couple of other factors that I think kind of play a little bit more into it, some of which people are aware of and some of which people aren't.
Yeah.
There's the fact that when you say something to an awful lot of these systems, especially if it's on a smartphone, it's not actually the smartphone doing the processing of all of this.
Well, what's happening?
Okay, so what happens there for a lot of these services is, in fact, your voice gets recorded, your smartphone's not powerful enough and it doesn't have the software entirely loaded on it to do all of that voice recognition stuff. So it gets flung up to Apple or to Google, or presumably in the future to Microsoft with Cortana. They then do some lightning quick analysis on it to work out that, Picard said phasers, and then they send it back down to your device. Now what this means, of course, is that all your voice stuff is going to external servers. Some of them are a little bit more open about what they do or don't do with that data. All of them undeniably use it in aggregate to make their services a bit better.
And you can kind of assume that if the NSA wants to listen in, they will listen in.
Yeah, exactly. Hi, NSA.
Hello.
Okay, but I think the other thing, and it's not a technology issue to speak of, is the social aspect of it. It's one thing to say, well, look, I've got voice control for stuff at home, so I can say lights, or I can talk to an Xbox One and get it to do stuff some of the time when it works.
When it feels like it.
Yeah, when it feels like it. It's another thing to sit there and, put a call through to the VD clinic when you're sitting on a train. That's something that, as much as Star Trek might say, well, everyone loves talking to computers there, that's a barrier I'm not sure we've jumped just yet. Would you feel comfortable making a personal call, not necessarily to the VD clinic, I'll leave that up to the viewer's imagination, but would you feel comfortable making that kind of call on a train, via Siri or whatever?
Well, I wouldn't, but the phone calls that you hear people having on public transport where there's a person on the other end, they talk about all kinds of private stuff that you think, why are you talking about with this? So what makes you think that people would use something like Siri any different?
Well, I mean, the private phone conversations that people have on trains, bear in mind, a lot of people are very stupid. Yes. But that aside, no, I think, yeah, by viewership, I think the difference there really is that when you're talking to another person, you're involved with that person in some way. You're in the moment, and for an awful lot of people, they don't realise, for example, how loud you are on a mobile phone. People speak up and suddenly the whole train can hear the details of your messy breakup. When you're talking to a Siri or whatever, I've never hit a point where I've ever thought I'm talking to a real person. I'm always that bit removed from it. So I'm always very aware of what I'm saying. And I think that's the thing. I'll use Siri from time to time, if it's handy around the house, because no one else is listening, that's fine. I've never used it in public, never ever.
No.
And I don't know that that's going to change.
I don't use Siri at all. I haven't found anything that it does that's more convenient for me than just picking up my phone and getting it to do what I want it to do. And the same with all this other voice control stuff. I've tested voice control on games consoles and televisions and all kinds of stuff, and at the end of the day it's usually just easier to reach for the remote control and change the channel or find the movie or do whatever it is I want to do. And for me, that's the test of voice control, whatever it is that you're trying to do. If there's another way to do it, if the remote control or a keyboard is within arm's reach, will you still use the voice control, or will you just go, screw it, it's easier for the remote control? And if you still go for the remote control, then that's because voice has failed. It has to be the easiest option, the most convenient option, and usually it's not, from my experience so far.
Right now, look, it depends on the technology, but that's technology that's improving. I think that social barrier is the next big one that's got to be jumped.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that it can't be jumped.
Yeah,
10
but it's
years
not a
ago,
question of technology though.
Yeah. 10 years ago, if you'd walk down the street staring into your smartphone, well, not you had a smartphone then, but staring into your feature phone, people would have thought there was something mentally wrong with you.
Or you really liked playing Snake on your Nokia.
Exactly. But now, frankly, it's a case of dodgems. You've got to kind of get around all the people who are doing just that. And maybe voice will go that way in the future. So a new series of Game of Thrones is upon us, but in Australia at least, winter has come. We can only get it through one provider. Is this good news or bad news, Adam?
It's good news for Foxtel. It's maybe bad news for everybody else. Last year there was a couple of different ways to watch Game of Thrones in Australia. You could get a full Foxtel subscription, or you could buy it from iTunes the next day or from QuickFlix the next day. So you had some options. This season, Foxtel's gone out and signed a new deal with HBO, obviously for a shed load of money, and in return there is no other way to legally watch Game of Thrones in Australia. It started this week. If you want to watch that episode, you've got to give your money to Foxtel. No one else is allowed to show it until Foxtel has shown the entire series. So that means waiting until June before iTunes or QuickFlix can give you even the first episode. And the DVDs probably won't come out until next February, so that's an even longer wait. If you're trying to avoid spoilers, that's a long time to walk around with your fingers in the ears and hope that, your favourite character didn't die. Although I can spoil it for you now. Your favourite character's dead. Just come to terms with it. They're all dead. We know how Game of Thrones works.
I'll admit, I was someone who watched it via iTunes last year. That was really convenient. The price was right. I thought that was really good. So, this is a pretty solid pain point.
Yeah.
I guess that points, though, to a fairly inevitable conclusion about what an awful lot of people are actually going to do.
Yeah, I mean, if you were watching it on iTunes or QuickFlix, then you were doing the right thing. You were choosing to pay even though you knew you could go and steal it. And then they deliberately took away that legitimate option. Now, are you going to feel like, oh yeah, I'm now happy to give Foxtel more money after they screwed me over, or screw you guys, I'm just going to steal it? I think a lot of people who were watching it that way last year, on principle, will steal it. I know that sounds like an odd thing to say, but they're not going to want to give their money to Foxtel. But when you do crunch the numbers, and I think this is something you've looked at as well, without wanting to, defend Foxtel, it's not actually as bad a deal as it might seem.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's an interesting one. As I say, last year I watched the thing via iTunes, and I wish I could do that this year. But Foxtel's chopped its prices down for a limited period for Foxtel Play, which, again, it's only standard def, but it's watchable, to Around $45 a month is the minimum you're going to be paying to watch Game of Thrones and a lot of other content. And whether or not that's good value to you is, of course, a very, very relative thing. I don't care about sports, and I'm never going to buy a sports package. A lot of other people are quite different that way. Yeah. That being said, though, Game of Thrones comes via HBO, and HBO views itself as the premium channel, and they're very defensive about this stuff. So I went and had a bit of a look at what HBO charges in the States, because this argument often comes down to but it's cheaper over in the States, you can get Netflix for $10.
Well, you're not going to get Game of Thrones on Netflix, though, because HBO
We've
and
discussed this before.
hate each other. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah. And the reality is that in the States, what you're actually looking at is generally a cable TV package, and that can run up to $100 a month.
And not basic cable either.
Easily.
Basic cable will not get you
because HBO is premium cable, exactly. You've got to have your basic cable channels, and then you whack HBO on the top of it, and it's incredibly button. It's an amazing Gordian knot of entangled contracts, and there are some great articles out there if you want to go digging on how to get an internet-only version of HBO. And it can be done, or at least allegedly it can be done. I haven't done it myself. Obviously, I'm not based in the States. But it can be done, but it's very difficult, and apparently you've got to argue through all sorts of people. And even when you do that, it ends up running to about $50-$60 per month, according to all the articles I've seen. Now, $50-$60 US per month is more than $45 per month. Yeah. And the Foxtel Play thing has other stuff. Again, whether or not that's value to you is relative, but it's not perhaps as evil a deal as it might seem, although it is an annoying one.
But I mean, that's the frustration that people have, is the cornerstone of the pay TV business model is getting you to pay for a hell of a lot of crap you don't want to watch the few things that you do. Not just getting you to pay for a package to get one channel, but to getting you pay for a basic package so you can then pay for the package that you want, so you can then get the channel that you want, that you then have the show that you want. That's what really annoys people, but they're not going to get a different kind of deal from a pay TV provider in the future. That's the way that it works, and that's why they don't share this stuff with Netflix, because who the hell would want to sign up for all that crap if you could get it from Netflix?
But the Netflix model isn't even all that different anyway. You're still spending $10 a month on, a bunch of old, and again, we've discussed it before, a bunch of old movies you might not want to watch, a whole bunch of TV shows you might want to watch.
But for $10 a month, you've only got to find one or two shows and you might be happy. For $50 a month, you've got to get a lot more out of it.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. There's some scaling here. But the reality is as well, though, you're paying for a bunch of channels that you don't want, but someone else might. The system supports itself from within. And again, the reality may well be right now that if you said, yes, you want a la carte, well, actually, the a la carte's going to cost you a lot more, because certain niche interests will only have a small user base. And this is something we've both kind of looked at in some detail. But I think the bottom line is, Australia is going to do fairly well, shamefully, but fairly well in the piracy stakes this time round.
If you ask the bookies, we're going to do really well. Sportsbet's actually running a book on whether or not Australia is going to be the biggest downloaders, and we're the favourites. We're paying, I think, $2.20. The US is paying $3. Canada might be paying $4. I think right down the bottom, like Portugal or someone's paying $40. But the smart money is on Australia.
Portugal, you're letting yourself down.
And I mean, everybody, they need to make more of an effort, really. They need to lift their game. But the smart money says that Australia is going to lead the way. And I think, like the season 3, the final episode of season 3, the new series, it's going to break records for Foxtel, it's going to break records for HBO, and it's going to break records for BitTorrent. And what Foxtel's done with HBO is not going to win them any friends back from the BitTorrent community. They're not going to bring new people in. So it's an interesting short-term plan, but in the long term, you're not going to beat piracy that way. I guess they're charging Foxtel so much for this deal that they just don't care. And so we come to the end of another episode of Vertical Hold. Remember, winter is coming.
And that damned throne will be mine.